There is a room in Key West, Florida, where the air feels different. It's heavy. It's thick with the scent of old wood, salt air, and something else. Something clinical, like a hospital wing. You're standing in the Fort East Martello Museum, surrounded by history. But you aren't looking at the Civil War artifacts. You're looking at a glass box. Inside that box sits a 3-foot-tall figure. He wears a faded white sailor suit. His face is a pitted, scarred landscape of burlap and straw. He doesn't have a mouth, yet people claim to hear him scream. He doesn't have eyes, yet thousands of visitors swear they felt his gaze follow them across the room. This is Robert, but it's not the doll that stops your heart. It's the walls. Every inch of the wall space surrounding his enclosure is covered. Not with plaques or descriptions, but with paper. Hundreds, thousands of handwritten letters, postcards, scrawled notes on napkins. They all say the same thing.
I'm sorry, Robert. Please, Robert, make it stop. I didn't mean to disrespect you.
These aren't fan letters. They are pleas for mercy. They come from doctors, lawyers, skeptics, and children. All of them made one fatal mistake. They looked at Robert, they mocked him, or they took a photograph without asking. And then their lives fell apart. Car accidents, house fires, sudden, inexplicable illnesses. Why does a century-old toy wield this kind of power? Is it a curse, a haunting, or something far more coordinated? Before Annabelle, before Chucky, before every Hollywood nightmare you've ever seen, there was the original terror. And today, we're going to find out why the world is so afraid of a boy in a sailor suit. But before we go any further, I have to ask you, do you have his permission to watch this? Because what happened next gets worse. To understand the monster, we have to look at the child. 1904. The Otto family was wealthy, prominent, and lived in a beautiful home at 534 Eaton Street. They had servants, a massive Victorian estate, and a young son named Robert Eugene Otto, known to everyone as Gene. One afternoon, a gift arrived. Some stories say it was a birthday present from his grandfather. Other, darker accounts suggest it was a parting gift from a Bahamian servant who had been mistreated by the Otto family. A woman who practiced folk magic, a blend of local traditions and ancient intent. The gift was a doll. It was nearly as tall as Gene himself. It was stuffed with wood wool and dressed in an actual sailor suit that Gene had outgrown. From the moment the doll entered the house, the atmosphere shifted. Gene became obsessed. He renamed himself Eugene and insisted the doll take his first name, Robert. He took the doll everywhere. He ate with it. He slept with it. He talked to it. At first, the parents thought it was charming, a lonely boy with a vivid imagination. But then, the noises started. Gene's mother would pass by his bedroom door and hear two distinct voices. One was Gene's high-pitched, childish prattle. The other was a low, guttural rasp. A voice that didn't belong in a child's room. A voice that sounded old. When she would burst into the room, Gene would be huddled in the corner, shaking. Robert would be sitting on a chair, staring at the door. When asked about the second voice, or the broken toys appearing in the middle of the night, or the furniture overturned while Gene was asleep, the boy would only whisper 4 words.
Robert did it.
It became a mantra, a shield. But as the years went by, the family realized that Robert did it wasn't an excuse. It was a warning. Neighbors began to report something impossible. They claimed that when the Otto family was out of the house, they could see the doll moving, just sliding, walking, pacing from window to window, watching the street, its expression changing from a blank stare to a malicious grin. But that wasn't the end. The house on Eaton Street was about to become a prison. As Gene grew into a man, everyone expected him to leave Robert behind. Most children outgrow their toys, but Gene Otto was different. He studied art in New York and Paris. He became a professional painter, but he never let go of the doll. When Gene returned to Key West to live in the family home after his parents passed, Robert wasn't put in a box in the attic. He was given his own room. Gene's wife, Anne, was terrified of the doll. She felt it, the weight of its presence. She claimed that the doll's facial expressions would shift based on Gene's mood. Or rather, that Robert's mood dictated Gene's. If Gene was happy, the doll looked neutral. If Gene was angry, the doll's beaded eyes seemed to glow with a dull red light. Anne eventually demanded the doll be locked away. Gene complied, moving Robert to a turret room at the top of the house. But the lock didn't matter. Visitors to the house would hear footsteps pacing above them, not the heavy thud of a man, but the light, rhythmic patter of small feet. They would hear a mocking, high-pitched giggle echoing through the vents. People refused to stay the night. Servants quit within days, claiming the doll would appear in rooms where it hadn't been left. Gene became a recluse. He spent his days in the turret room with Robert. When Gene died in 1974, everyone assumed the nightmare was over. The house was sold to a new family. They found Robert in the attic. The new owners had a 10-year-old daughter. She found the doll and added it to her collection. She didn't know the rules. Within weeks, the girl began screaming in the middle of the night. She claimed the doll was trying to kill her. She told her parents that Robert would climb onto her bed while she slept and sit on her chest, his small hands moving toward her throat. Decades later, as an adult, she still maintains that the doll was alive, that it had a soul, and that the soul was hungry. But why? Why this specific object? Was it the servant's curse from 1904? Or had Gene Otto's own trauma and obsession charged the doll like a battery? We're about to look at the evidence that suggests Robert isn't just a ghost. He's a collector. In 1994, Robert was donated to the Fort East Martello Museum. The staff thought he was a curiosity, a local legend. They didn't realize they were inviting a predatory entity into their workspace. Almost immediately, the museum's electronics began to fail. Cameras would malfunction only when pointed at Robert. Lights would flicker and die. And then, the visitors started reporting the shadows. People would take a photo of the doll, laughing at the legend. They would leave the museum feeling fine. Then, the calls started coming in. One man wrote to the museum explaining that after taking a photo of Robert without asking, his rental car's engine exploded on the way back to the hotel. A woman claimed she lost her job and her husband within the same week after mocking the doll's sailor suit. This is where the permission rule comes from. It isn't a marketing gimmick. It's a survival tactic. If you visit Robert today, you must stand before the glass and ask him, clearly and respectfully,
Robert, may I please take your photograph?
The museum staff watches the doll's head. They swear that sometimes he tilts it. A slight, almost imperceptible nod. That is your cue. If you don't get the nod, and you take the photo anyway, you are joining a very specific, very miserable club. The walls of letters are a physical manifestation of a karmic loop. These letters aren't just for Robert. They are a desperate attempt by victims to break the connection. Some people include offerings, money, candy, or even locks of hair. They believe Robert has latched onto them, and only a public apology can sever the tie. But here's the contradiction that investigators can't explain. If Robert is a cursed object, the curse should be static. It should be a fixed energy. But Robert seems to evolve. He reacts to the modern world. He knows when he's being recorded. He knows when he's being talked about on the internet. Researchers who have studied the letters noticed a pattern. The bad luck isn't random. It's surgical. It hits people where they are most vulnerable. The skeptic loses their logic. The wealthy person loses their money. The happy person loses their peace. It's as if Robert isn't just punishing disrespect. He's feeding on the emotional fallout. And that leads us to the most disturbing theory of all. One that reframes everything we know about Gene Otto. For a century, we've blamed the doll. We've called Robert a vessel for a curse or a demon. But what if we've been looking at it backward? What if Robert wasn't the monster? What if he was the victim? Psychologists who have looked at the life of Gene Otto see a different story. Gene was a child of extreme privilege and potentially extreme isolation. His obsession with the doll might have been a manifestation of a split personality brought on by trauma. By saying Robert did it, Gene was able to externalize his darkest impulses. Every time Gene was angry, every time he wanted to lash out, he did it through Robert. For 70 years, Gene Otto poured his subconscious mind, his rage, and his secrets into that straw-filled body. There is a concept in occultism called a Tulpa, a thought form, an entity created purely through the power of belief and repeated mental energy. If a human being spends an entire lifetime believing an object is alive, talking to it, and giving it blame for their actions, does that object eventually wake up? Robert might not be haunted by a ghost. Robert might be a memory that refused to die. A physical shell containing the concentrated essence of Gene Otto's shadow self. When you look at Robert today, you aren't looking at a doll. You're looking at 100 years of human obsession given form. The doll doesn't move because of magic. It moves because it has been taught to be a person. The apology letters, they are the fuel. Every time someone writes a letter, every time someone fears him, they are acknowledging his power. They are giving him exactly what Gene Otto gave him: attention, belief, life. The permission rule isn't about respect, it's about submission. Robert wants you to acknowledge that he is the one in control of the room. As you leave the museum, you might think you're safe. You asked permission. You were respectful. You didn't take a photo. But Robert doesn't just stay in the glass box. He's in your head now. You're thinking about him. You're wondering if he's real. You're wondering if that sound in your house tonight is just the wind, or if he followed you home. Because remember, the girl from 1974 said he could move through walls, and Gene Otto said he never really left. Robert is waiting, and he doesn't need a letter to find you. What happened next gets worse. But that's a story for another time.